explosions to the brain, going out in style.
It's all yours, Converse.
All right. Hey, everybody. Today we're going to be debating, does reality prove God? We want to welcome everybody. Tonight we're going to have Jim Majors and Red Venture versus Dry Apologist and Travis. First of all, if you haven't, hit that sub button. Also, hit the like button on this video and follow my lead and become a Patreon if you haven't already. This channel has been very productive. It helps out a lot of people on both sides. It's building bridges. So I'm really excited about the channel, and we want everybody to feel welcome here, regardless of your background. Also, tonight's format is as follows: 10-minute openings for each side. Each side is able to split up that 10 minutes however they will. Then after that, we'll have a 50-minute open discussion where I'll try and stay out as much as possible. Then we'll have a 25-minute Q&A. So get in your questions for the Q&A. Closer to the end will be easier, but I have Praise tonight helping out, so he will be keeping up with those for me and make my job a lot easier. All right, so I guess we will start with the Dry Apologist and Travis for 10 minutes.
All right, I'm going to go first. All right, thank you. So I'm going to be given a version of the argument from contingency. I present it differently every time, so just bear with me here. So I'm defining necessary as that which could not have been other than the way that it is, and contingent is that which could have been other than the way it is. Now, even if it's argued that causality does not apply to all contingent things and events, as sometimes gets argued, the fact that causality consistently applies to at least many contingent things and events is enough for that consistency to need to be grounded in a necessarily consistent causal framework in order to account for why contingent things' causal consistency does not break down. Yet, in order for the necessarily consistent causal framework to actually apply to reality, it must itself be grounded in something concrete, for only concrete things can apply to reality. Yet, the only type of concrete thing that could ground a necessarily consistent causal framework would be a necessary concrete thing, because only something necessary can ground something necessary. A necessary concrete thing must be something that's unlimited in its fundamental properties, which are properties that don't logically require other properties in order to exist, such as presence, intelligence, love, justice, power, and so on. For if something is limited in its fundamental properties, then that thing is contingent, because something that's limited in fundamental properties in one way could have always been fundamentally limited in another way. But a necessary thing could not have been other than the way it is, because that's what it means to be necessary. So a necessary concrete thing cannot be limited in its fundamental properties, but rather must be unlimited in them, and thereby unlimited in presence, knowledge, power, intelligence, love, and justice. And that's what we mean by God. Therefore, God exists. Thank you. I now turn my time over to Travis.
Okay, great. So to kind of caveat on that, I'm going to be arguing for contingency from point of reference of Christian idealism. Okay, so in the hunt to bridge quantum mechanics with general relativity, the holographic principle is widely regarded as an essential feature of a successful theory of everything. The holographic principle states that gravity in a three-dimensional volume can be described by quantum mechanics on a two-dimensional surface surrounding the volume. In particular, the three dimensions of the volume should emerge from the two dimensions of the surface. Physicists believe that quantum entanglement is the key to this mechanism. A corroboration of physicists and mathematicians have made significant steps toward unifying general relativity and quantum mechanics by explaining how space-time emerges from quantum entanglement. In fact, the UK and Canadian study has provided what researchers believe is the first observational evidence that our universe could be a complex hologram. physicists and astrophysicists investigating irregularities in the cosmic microwave background have found that there is substantial evidence supporting a holographic explanation of the universe. In fact, as much as there is for the traditional explanation of these irregularities using the theory of cosmic inflation. So essentially, our universe is a 3D holographic projection of 2D information processing, or quantum entanglement. So therefore, based on this, as well as studies in quantum cognition, which state that information processing and entangled states are the product of mind, a deduction can be made. Information processing is the product of mind. The universe emerges from information processing. Therefore, the universe is the product of a mind, and this mind is who we call God. With that, I'll concede my time.
All right, thanks so much for that. It only took about 4.5 minutes, so great. We'll save that for the Q&A time. Now I'll turn it over to Jim and Red. How do you guys want to split it up? Go right ahead.
Okay. So what we're arguing today is contingency, and contingent things depend on something for their existence necessarily. They don't necessarily have to exist, but if they exist, then they have to depend on something. This argument is a way to explain the necessary foundation of those contingent things. The ultimate source of it all, so to speak. So the first premise is that something exists, and the second one is that everything that does exist has a cause or is dependent on something, or not, or it doesn't exist. And a reality as such, with only contingent things, must depend on something, which is the third premise, something beyond itself, because contingent things don't happen without a cause. But nothing within this contingent reality can account for its own existence. Is God in this reality? And if God isn't in this reality, in this universe, whenever He created in the universe, where did He reside? He necessarily had to reside in some other place. And if a mind can create matter, such as they assert, then I would ask how a disembodied mind without any agency is able to interact with material and to create. And if a mind can create with it without it being a problem, then why did God design us in meat suits that animals think are tasty? I think that's about where I'm going to stop there.
All right. Yeah, I don't really have a big intro. There's a few questions I have to ask so we can get into the discussion, so we can work from there.
Okay.
All righty.
All right. You said you are going to present something?
Oh, no. We can go on to the discussion.
Okay. Sure. Let me just say, for somebody who's in the chat was asking, who's the theist and who's the atheist? If you're unfamiliar, I'm sorry, I should have presented that. We have Jim, the mustache major.
Hi, I'm the theist.
He is an atheist. He's bringing up with
That's
Red.
right.
They're tag teaming. They're going to be taking the negative on this. And we have the affirmative Caleb, the dry apologist, as well as Travis. So, and with that, I'll just open it up to the open discussion. You guys take it from here.
Okay, so Jim, one thing I noticed, like, when you were saying that, how can a mind produce matter and so forth, it almost seems like a categorical error, because it's sort of putting God within the confines of the 3 dimensions in time that we exist in and the necessary laws of physics, but the creator would be transcendent. So not really outside or within, but rather transcendent of the reality, and the reality would depend on him.
So you would agree that God's reality is not our reality?
Our reality is a hologram from a more fundamental reality.
Sure, it's an illusion due to the limits of our perception. We can only perceive it in such a way that's the way that we perceive it, right?
Right. And see, what's interesting is like we're stuck in 3 dimensions in time,
Well,
but the creator of the universe would transcend the universe with its 10 plus dimensions. I mean, there's like 6 spatial dimensions that we have no access to. And
Sure.
with the laws of, I mean, so we're very like finite in our understanding. And so,
can you explain to me how a mind can exist nowhere?
because it's not bound within the laws of space and time, it's transcendent.
I understand that, but in order for it to create something into something, it had to have something to create the universe into. You know what I mean? Like, there had to have been a space from which to create it, a stage, so to speak.
No, not necessarily. That's kind of ascribing our laws of physics to.
Well, it sounds like you're attributing a lot of characteristics to God that is I would call, you know, category errors. I feel like it's special pleading, and like whenever there are these spots of difficulty, you just special plead and then say, well, that's it's a different category. You know, it's God, so these rules don't apply to him.
Well, okay. What's interesting is it does sound like, you know, in some areas, like it could be like, you know, special pleading, but it's actually a necessary deduction of the causal agent of the universe.
How so?
Because, okay, so we're in 3 dimensions in time, and, you know, the universe is a minimum of 10 plus dimensions. So it's created by information processing. So the creator of the universe would necessarily transcend any laws of physics, like needing space, needing time, etc. I mean,
I would say that when you say that 6 dimensions alone goes beyond our understanding of physics, and given that, I mean, who are we to say that that if all events are caused, that we just don't have an infinite regress?
Well, we know the Big Bang occurred about 13.79 billion years ago.
Sure,
so
but we don't know that was the beginning.
I'm sorry?
But we don't know that was the beginning.
Right. Now, in fact, I hold to the B theory of time. So I would say that, you know, I'm not speaking about the cosmos, rather that our universe occurred about 13.79 billion years ago.
Sure. What about the thought? So like for instance, you know, back in Jesus's time, their idea of the universe or the cosmos was very limited. Most likely, it was limited to the Milky Way. You know, if not smaller than that, you know, to our own galaxy. And recently, you know, we know of millions, billions of other galaxies that are out there. So who are we to, you know, be so bold and arrogant to think that we have it all figured out? That we might just be one universe of an infinite amount of universes, all with varying universal constants.
Well, what's interesting is, you know, and I actually agree with a lot of that, but there's also a lot of branches of physics that are, you know, especially with quantum mechanics, that we're starting to understand more and more. And I see the evidence pointing in a theistic or maybe deistic model of reality.
Well, it seems like most physicists that I've seen talk about it recently, they say that the signs point to an infinite regress, either the universe being being part of a multiverse, the multiple world theory, or something like a big bounce theory, something like that.
Well, I actually agree with the multiverse. Because I mean, I'm a proponent of superstring theory, which would posit multiple dimensions.
So,
but as far
given
as
that scenario, did God create all of the universes?
Yes, he would be the information or the knowledge from which everything comes.
And being as he's transcendent, he cannot reside within those created universes, right?
Well, actually, if he's transcendent, he would be both within and outside simultaneously. So it's not really in or out; it's transcendent or independent of what we would consider physical reality.
And you believe that this God is eternal, like both past and present, and that's somewhere along that eternity, and an eternity of existence, God finally decided, hey, I'm going to create all of these universes.
Well, I think it's important to realize that we experience time from our point of reference,
Mhm.
But the reality is that both space and time are like emergent properties of quantum entanglement, and so they're actually not fundamental.
Right. Yeah. If we go back to just even the singularity of the Big Bang of this universe, the laws of physics start to fall apart.
Yeah.
So I mean, how we conceive the space time, the in the fourth dimension, it's totally different than the linear time that we experience now. So yeah, I do think that that's a really important difference, to draw there. But there's still a beginning and of creation, however you want to put it. Once that quantum entanglement begins, something starts. So that there had to have been a start. It's not something that could have been an eternal process of God's existence. You know what I'm saying? Because you're a evolutionary deist, correct?
I'm a theistic evolutionist. Yes, I hold that
Theistic or deistic?
theistic. I would affirm that God created the universe, but that He works within the laws of physics, not within them. Sort of like a biologos Francis Collins approach.
So He doesn't do miracles?
He does, but because He transcends the laws of physics. What I'm saying, as far as like creation, like how we got here and everything, I would say that that's a result of strictly natural processes. I'm just clarifying, man.
Okay, so you believe that that He created humans by starting off with very basic single cellular life forms?
Yes, about 3.8 million years. Yes.
And we're His special creation, though. And
Yes,
we were made in His image.
I hold to John Walton's view of temple inauguration, that Adam and Eve would have been about 15,000 years ago in the ancient Persian Gulf oasis. But I mean, that's a whole other can of worms. But I hold that there's like two populations: those that evolved from the hominids and the great apes, and those a distinct line about 15,000 years ago where He called Adam and Eve to reside and set up temple inauguration.
Is that the Hebrew and Gentile, or is that like a some kind of great deluge argument?
The Great Deluge.
Okay, so you believe that like the Sasquatchian or cavemen, just to put it crudely, are one evolutionary line, and then those from the created Adam and Eve, which God created, I'm guessing, much later than He created the universe. After evolution had already began, He saw fit to create in parallel something very similar to early hominids. Correct?
Sort of. I'm saying that what He did is it wouldn't be a physical process more than like a spiritual process. Namely, He called mankind to have His image, and what that means is that He put them as like rulers over creation, to have dominion and so forth.
So the cavemen didn't have that?
Not to the degree that Adam and Eve would have. I mean, I don't want to get too far off topic with this.
No, sure. But okay, but as far as creation goes, you realize that the only reason that you think that it's that you think it was made for us, or made in a way that it would support life for us, is because it does support life for us. If it was made in any other way, where life as we know it, you and I, couldn't exist, then we could never observe it, But that doesn't mean that any life couldn't exist. So you and I, in a hypothetical other universe where the universal constants are different, say gravity is just a little bit off, or maybe we're silicon-based life forms instead of carbon-based life forms, it'd be a lot different for us. But you and I would still look at it the same way, as in, wow, we're alive, so this must be fine-tuned for us because we exist here.
Okay, so now we're kind of getting into the fine-tuning, and you're sort of presenting sort of a puddle analogy, to which I would apply the firing squad analogy, which I think answers that quite well. But I would actually sort of add fine-tuning into the digital physics, namely that it shows that information was uploaded at the time of the Big Bang for a specific outcome. I would compare it to sort of like uploading information into a disk to run a program.
But it's not just information though. It's not just zeros and ones. It's matter.
It's matter is emergent from zeros and ones, actually.
So okay. So if you believe that matter is made from zeros and ones, then why don't you posit that we're just part of a simulation? Wouldn't that be much more congruent to your beliefs?
Well, the simulation theory has problems with it. I think I think they debunked it. I'm not sure, but I think there was a problem with like the number of electrons in the universe, like just would not add up to like on a grand scale. I would hold to more of the quantum scale, sort of like IP's argument for digital physics, kind of that.
Can you apply that same argument to your first cause claim, being God?
Well, my claim was that information processing is the product of mind. The universe emerges from information processing, therefore the universe would be the product of a mind, and that mind is called God.
But we don't see physical matter coming from our minds. You and I, we cannot create physical. There's no reason to suggest that physical matter can come from a mind.
Right. Yeah. Physical matter came from information processing and quantum entanglement, and studies in quantum cognition show that it's actually the product of mind.
There is info in the quantum entanglement in that we can it can be read and it can be observed, what's going on, but it's not willfully putting out this information and willfully creating. It's the info that we see is something that is observed, not necessarily prescribed.
Well, I mean, again, that's kind of getting into the puddle analogy, and to that. And I don't want to hog everybody else's time, but I would say that with the fine tuning, it shows that information was uploaded at the time that the universe emerged from the entanglement. It had encoded information to run a program, which is what I would describe as the fine tuning, namely for life to be here for a specific purpose.
How does it show that, given the quantum peculiarities in the early stages of the universe?
Well, what I'm doing is I'm applying the quantum, like the information processing that the universe emerged from, and I'm also applying the macro sort of general relativity, which would apply to the fine tuning. So I'm trying to combine the two.
Right. But what you're doing basically is you're stumbling upon a murder scene, and you're seeing people murdered all over the floor, and you say, man, something had to have caused this. Something had to have caused all this death. Therefore, Johnny did it. Johnny did it. I didn't see it. I wasn't here, but I believe that Johnny did it. So and it fits because Johnny could do this. He has the ability to. He lives in town. He has a gun. He's close by. So there's no reason for me to say that Johnny didn't do it. He fills all the blanks in, but we're not justified in making that claim.
Well, hey, let's get the other two guys in on this and let them.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, I just want to respond to a couple of things. So, to me, that we're not drawing upon. Well, I mean, admittedly, Travis has drawn upon some scientific evidence, so his case may be a little bit more inductive than mine. But with gathering like data and such, isn't necessarily relevant with the contingency argument, which is more of a deductive argument about the nature of reality. But in regards to some of your questions, Jim, like where did God reside in this reality? God is the necessary aspect of reality. If by reality we mean just the sum total of everything and every possible thing, he'd be the necessary aspect, but not the contingent aspect. So he created the contingent aspect. So that's how I'd respond to that. And then in regards to if a mind can create matter, how can a disembodied mind interact and create? I don't see any contradiction. Of course, our minds can't create matter, but we're not the creator. It's, I don't see.
It's the way that we perceive reality, right? It's not actual reality or true reality. It's a flawed illusion of reality.
Well, it depends on what you mean by illusion. I mean, Travis seems to hold more to an idealist picture, which I'm not debating with him on that. I don't lean in that direction, but maybe that's where you're directing that question at more so.
Well,
I would say
that first claim, but yeah.
Sorry, what was that?
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Jim, what was that?
I'll just say I was directing that toward your first claim.
Oh,
About contingent reality? It's not illusory. God really created it.
No, but what you're talking about, like us perceiving reality in this certain way, or making claims about reality. We don't even understand reality. We don't. There are mantis shrimp in the ocean who have a wider. They can see a wider band of the color. Pardon me, color spectrum than we can. There's plenty of animals and insects and stuff like that are much better than us at perceiving reality. We are very, very limited in what we can perceive. So we can't even see close to what could be considered true reality, or the reality that God sees, God's reality.
Sure. I mean, I agree with that, but I mean, now we're going to get into more of an issue of epistemology, because the argument, at least that I'm making, isn't about based on perceptions. It's based on applying conceivability and logic, so basic laws of logic, to concrete reality. And I don't think our perception is necessary for that. It's just a logical argument. Now, you may disagree with being able to apply logic in that way, but to me, that's quite different than like an animal being able to see different streams of light. So I look at that, like, I think you're drawing it more from like an empirical matter, and the argument, at least I'm making, isn't really empirical. It's more just deductive.
Okay. I'll let you get in, Red. I don't think you've even gotten to say anything.
It's all right. The physics stuff is a little beyond some of my things, so I'm glad you took on that. So trying to get caught up on the argument you presented earlier, Dry. So you want to walk me through the premises one more time?
Sure. And I know it's a lot to take in, and I trimmed it down as much as I can. But yes, so basically the argument is that contingent things and events, being things and events that are, but they could have been otherwise, like we were having this debate, but we didn't have to, and so on, that in order for contingency to be consistent causally, it needs to be grounded in what I'm calling a necessarily consistent causal framework. Sometimes that might be called like principle of sufficient reason, but I think that this framing works a little bit better. And then I'm arguing that necessarily consistent causal framework has to be grounded in something concrete. So the difference between concrete and abstract is kind of like the difference between something that can interact with reality and something that's more conceptual. And then a necessary concrete thing can't be contingent, and thereby it must be completely unlimited in its fundamental traits, and then thereby that leads to the traditional attributes of God. So I know that even that was a lot to sort out, but that's basically the argument.
All right. Well, and so my question to you, what prevents just reality being that concrete first cause? Because, right, I don't know if I buy. You'd have to get into a little more on why those properties you think of God are necessary to be that concrete.
Well, when you say reality, I mean, like, what do you? I mean, I kind of agree with that, but like, do you mean like the universe? When you say reality, that's a kind of like the most generic.
Well, I wouldn't say I wouldn't say just like universes in like our local space time or anything like that.
Right, so, but something natural.
Well, so what I
like a necessary reality.
No, what I would say be like instead of saying universe, just think like a metaverse, from which, like, if we take multiple world theories and stuff like that,
gotcha,
the different universes spring out of.
Okay, so some sort of like non-theistic first cause, like whatever that might be. Yeah. Like, okay, yeah, I mean that.
You have to explain the ontology of that, though. I mean, if you're,
sure.
I mean, like
infinite regress.
Well, I'll let you get in, Travis. Just let me respond to this one point. So, yeah, you can grant that the necessary thing is not God up until I argue that it's fundamentally unlimited. But if you're going to argue whatever the necessary being or thing is, that if it has to be fundamentally unlimited, then that's going to lead to all these other attributes that is going to lead to an all-powerful, all-present, all-intelligent being. Now, you could push back on that point, but that's where I would move from naturalistic first cause to theistic first cause.
But if the universe is a product of an infinite regress, then there is no first cause, so that there never has to be one posited.
There's a sustaining first cause. So a difference between like a first cause at the beginning of time, like I'm willing to grant that fine, there's an infinite regress of past events, but is that chain of events, is it contingent or is it necessary? If you're going to say it's necessary, now we have a necessary thing. But if you're going to say it's contingent, well, then why is there that chain of contingent things? And then you're going to need to posit a necessary thing if you're going to grant, my causal framework.
No,
Yeah,
it can be an infinite chain of causal events.
Sure, but it's a contingent.
From our point
chain.
of reference.
Right, they're contingent upon each other, but there is no foundation, no ultimate foundation upon which they're founded.
Why does that chain exist?
I don't know.
Right,
Why
so it's
does
either-
it exist? I mean, it's just,
It's either
one of those things.
contingent, right? And I'm going to let Travis go after this, but it's either contingent or necessary. If it's necessary, now we have a necessary thing. If it's contingent, now we have to ask, why does that contingent chain exist?
The
And if I
events
feel-
are contingent, but the whole of it is contingent upon the parts. So I guess the parts of it would be the necessary foundations, but they are also contingent upon each other. One cannot exist without the other.
Yeah, but to me, that sounds like it amounts to self-creation, but I'm going to let Travis go.
Okay, yeah. So my thoughts, basically, and I do take more of a, I'm more scientifically minded than philosophically, but studies in quantum cognition correlate to the information processing or quantum entanglement that the universe emerges out of, which shows that it has the products of mind. And this would include any infinite regresses, which actually wouldn't be. I mean, just it would seem that way from our point of reference of 3D and time. But
That would be with our understanding of what a mind is, right? Not a mind that would transcend our own human reasoning.
I'm sorry.
That's our understanding of our mind, not a mind that would transcend human reasoning.
And I can actually post it in the comments. It's the latest research from quantum cognition is showing that the information processing that the universe emerged out of has the products of mind. And my argument would be that, the universe is therefore contingent upon that mind. That would include any multiverses, and it would show that our consciousness has features related to the causal agent.
Sure, but you're going into it presuming that there has to be a first cause. If there is an infinite regress, then there's no then your argument explains nothing.
Well, a lot of the trouble I have with an infinite regress is how do you get emergent spacetime like 13.79 billion years ago? If we have an infinite chain, how do we get to
Well,
right now?
that's just this universe. Let's just use this universe as we understand it. We can be one upon an infinite amount of universes inside of a multiverse, which is inside of an infinite amount of multiverses and exponentially compounded.
Well, I would say there's problems with the infinite model of multiverses, but I do agree that there probably are multiverses. But nevertheless, they would all be contingent upon that information. And they would, according to the space-time theorems, the multiverse itself would have had a beginning.
Well, something that is infinite can't have a beginning. I'm sure that you know that you wouldn't. I'm sure that you would refuse somebody, or you would immediately go against somebody saying that God has a beginning because he's infinite.
Right.
But you're going to accuse me of moving the category error.
Well, what I'm saying is that what we perceive as physical reality, if you're saying a multiverse is part of reality, the multiverse itself would be contingent upon that information that it comes from.
Well, reality is that which can be observed and externally verified by somebody else. So something like the billions of universes, that's something that we can all look at the Hubble Space Telescope photos and see that clearly for ourselves. We can read the literature. We can go to you can go be astronomers or whatever. But that's something that can be proven. So that is within our reality.
Wait,
I believe that it can be. It hasn't, but that doesn't mean that it can't be.
I mean, that's kind of an appeal to futurism, isn't it?
Well, I mean, just like, back in the time of Jesus, they didn't know about all the other galaxies, that existed in just the expanse of our universe, how far it truly was. even though that's about the time that they started, making these type of arguments. Well, a couple centuries later, but that just shows how limited their minds were, and we're using these same arguments, knowing that what we know about the universe and the cosmos is just miles beyond what they could ever dream of, and we're still, saying, oh well, there's, well, this is contingent too, and once we discover the multiverse, they're going to say, well, this is contingent too, and so on and so forth. So it doesn't matter how much we discover. I believe that the argument for contingency will always be posited, because I don't believe that there is a beginning. I believe that there is an infinite regress, and we will never reach it. And it's an infinite regress. It's like a bunch of kids holding hands and spinning around in circles. And I'm saying they're spinning around in circles, and you're saying, no, there's a start and there's an end. I'm like, well, good luck finding it,
Well, my argument is that what we consider space and time are actually illusory, that they are an emergent feature of information. So it's essentially saying that our universe and physical reality, be it multiverses, whatever, are basically a 3D holographic projection of 2D information processing.
But
and I'm saying
you keep saying information. Like, what do you mean, like information? Like, can you demonstrate information creating something?
Quantum entanglement.
But can you demonstrate information willfully creating something? Like, we're not talking about something coming about and us observing it and getting the information from that, or I would say data, not information.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a deduction, and it's based on, they did a UK, Canadian, and Italian study showing that they were investigating irregularities in the cosmic background, and they found substantial evidence that the universe could be applied in the holographic principle. So, I mean, what I'm saying is that the evidence that we have right now, I feel strongly points towards theism, and that our universe is contingent upon that mind from what we have now. But I'll let somebody else.
Yeah. You get in there, Ed.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna just jump in. I haven't done studies and stuff that you said, but listening to the terminology you're throwing out there, and just doing what I can in the background, quick Wikipedia Andy over here. Quantum cognition refers to studies about the brain, the human brain, and how that stuff works. So so I have a feeling you're misrepresenting a hell of a lot of information and kind of Deepak Chopra. This stuff here and taking these.
Actually, I'm quoting peer-reviewed science that I can put in the comment section, and unless you can kind of substantiate that I'm misrepresenting science, it seems a little ad hoc.
Well, you'll have to send it to me, and I'll have to look at it. But just from listening to what you're saying, you're taking something that specifically is talking about a way of at understanding the human brain.
It compares like brain function with the way that quantum mechanics and general relativity are related. It's a sort of a theory of quantum mind. But I am absolutely going by what the studies say.
Well, I'll have to see the link to the studies. But yeah, it really does sound like you're garbling a bunch of stuff together like Deepak Chopra does.
Well,
just real quick. So since you concede that the multiverse and everything, I'm curious. What do you think about the properties of this universe as far as like the physical laws and such? Do you believe that humans exist in these alternate universes, or do you believe these universes that in which that were made in a way that we can't live, or that life can't be supported as we know it?
Well, with regard to the multiverse, I'm saying that it's possible. I'm not saying that I believe it is. I'm saying it's possible, sure. And I will bring it
just hypothetically speaking, of course. If there was a multiverse, are you saying that there are an infinite amount of universes in which we cannot live, or in which life cannot be supported? Because I mean, it's a lot to say that just in this universe that God created it in a way for life to be supported, because we know that life exists on this little speck of dust in comparison to it.
Okay, so what was the question? Sorry, I was writing.
Right. So these other universes, do you believe that if there are other universes or other worlds, that life can be supported in them, or that they were created with life in them?
I don't know. See, I think if we have an infinite number, that we're going to start running into logical problems, with an infinite number.
Well, the thing is, though, if we have an infinite number of them, then we would inevitably wind up with a universe in which life exists as we know it. So that doesn't say anything special about creation, because that's just what one would expect. If you were to roll a six-sided dice 100 times, we would expect to get all numbers 1 through 6 at least one time. So us doing that, would be no surprise.
So an infinite multiverse is hypothetical, and it would still be contingent upon a first cause. Number one, okay, and second,
no, it wouldn't.
Yeah, the space time. Again, I can put up the links. They would be subject
time, as we understand it, did not begin to exist until a good bit after the Big Bang, which you've already conceded. So space time, this is something that operates outside of space time.
Right, and what I'm saying is it would be contingent upon a first cause, which we see as information, which I would say is a product of mind, and therefore the universe is contingent upon God.
Unless it was an infinite regress, right?
No, and if I've said this several times, an infinite regress, which I'm not agreeing with you that there is an infinite regress. I mean, that would really need to be substantiated. But what I'm saying is that if there was, it would still be an emergent feature of quantum entanglement.
Right. If I was saying that it was, but we both agree that it is a possibility. But you are the one who is in fact stating that it is not an infinite regress. But you haven't
because what we consider time and space itself are illusory, because it's basically an emergent feature of quantum entanglement. So I mean,
it's not illusory to us, just on the grand scale.
I'm sorry?
Just on the grand scale, it's illusory. To you and I, it's not. I knew to be at this debate at 8 p.m. my time. It wasn't. I didn't have to go in and warp space time in order to get here or anything. Because as we perceive it, it's fine. We experience linear space time, but at one point that the linear space time did not. It was not subject to the laws of physics, but it was very early on in its creation. But that is no standing on its current state.
Was there a question?
No.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, can I just throw in a point from my perspective? Travis sorts through that. So, Jim, even with the infinite regress, I mean, there are a few difficulties I have with that. I mean, one, as I said before, it seems like the chain is either necessary or contingent. And if you're going to say, well, it's contingent, but then it causes itself, it seems like that amounts to self-causality, which ends up, to me, in my mind, that's incoherent to say something causes itself. But even if you grant an infinite chain existing as well, the argument that I presented about a necessarily consistent causal framework is that contingent things can't have causal consistency at all unless they're grounded in this sort of necessity. So even if there's an infinite chain, they're still grounded in this causal necessity, according to my argument, which you can contest, but I'm just saying this is how I'm responding, and then that's grounded in a necessary being. So the infinite regress, I really don't see that as and I mean, traditionally, the contingency argument, when put forth by Leibniz, Aquinas, down through the centuries, has been willing to concede an infinite chain and then to say, well, that chain itself needs a cause. So,
but the problem is that your God, once he started creation, once he started to create, he necessarily became a part of that causal chain, and yet you say that that he is not subject to contingency, that he's not a contingent being, that he is, I'm guessing you believe that he is self-causing. That I mean, 'cause you believe that he is
No, not
that
self-causing.
his existence is
necessary.
an infinite regress, right? That's what
No.
you believe.
No. He's necessary. So you could argue the universe is necessary too, but I'm arguing that because it, at least from my argument, is the fundamental
Necessary for
limitation.
what?
No, it's not necessary in a pragmatic sense. Like it's necessary I go to the grocery store if I want milk. It's necessary in this ontological sense, like could not have been otherwise.
Right, as a necessary foundation on which it doesn't depend on any contingent causal link.
Right, it's a necessary foundation, yes. But he's not
Right,
part of the chain of contingent causes. He causes
But it is
himself
part of the
to do
chain once it starts creating. Once
I
it
disagree.
creates, it becomes part of the chain. It's like
How?
it's like
When you transcend.
like the engine on a train. The engine on a train, once it starts pulling the train, it becomes part of that train. So all of the cars that are being pulled by that are a contingent cause of that first mover.
The God's
But
more
no-
like the train track, Jim. He's not like the locomotive. at the
No.
beginning.
He's not like
Yeah.
the train track. He's the engine. He's the one who set things into motion.
Right, he
But
did that,
he would
but the
be
whole
transcendent,
argument is that he's sustaining everything. No, this isn't the Kalam argument, but I'm gonna let Travis go.
Well, no, I just kind of wanted to caveat on what Droy Apologist was saying that, and Jim, this was in reference to your point, is that God would be within, but he wouldn't be subject. I think it kind of commits a categorical error because he wouldn't be subject to our three dimensions in time. He could be within them and outside of them as a in transcendence. What are your thoughts on that?
Can you demonstrate that God can exist inside and outside of reality?
Well, if there's a causal agent of the universe by necessity, he would transcend the 10 plus dimensions of our universe. And of course, we know that we're stuck in the 3D and time. So, you know,
Right.
He would
So he would have to
necessarily-
reside outside of our universe.
I'm sorry?
So he would have to reside outside of our universe during
Well-
in order to create the universe.
No, I would say it's not that he's outside or that he's inside, but to transcend or independent of.
Right. I'm talking before there was a universe. Where was God?
Where was okay? So space and time themselves are illusory, like I said.
Right. Right.
So we're stuck. Here's the thing: we're stuck in 3D and time. So from our point of reference, we have no way of accessing, that higher dimensional plane. So
why do you assert it?
you're asking me where was God, before creation, and that's beyond our realm of understanding.
Right.
Because
Right.
we're
But
subject to
logically,
space and time.
but logically, it would have to be
transcendent.
outside of it, because if he existed before it was created, then he has to exist outside of it. If he exists outside of it, then he exists somewhere else, and he would have to in order to create the universe.
He would exist outside and inside. And like I said,
Right.
transcendent is different than being bound within or like totally outside of enacting it. So
But-
he's transcendent.
But if I told you that I built a new house from the ground up, from inside of my house, you would think I was crazy. Like you'd be like, well, that doesn't really make sense, because you can't have a house before you have a house, or before you build it. So you can't both live in the house and build the house at the same time. You have to build the house before you can live in it.
Well, Jim, I mean, my point is that the causal agent of the universe, by necessity, would transcend the 10 plus dimensions of the universe, and we're stuck here in 3D. So,
Right, but you're claiming to know what happens past these four
I'm
dimensions.
saying the evidence in physics is pointing towards an idealistic interpretation.
The physics points toward an infinite regress.
No, the physics points to space-time being an emergent feature of quantum entanglement and information.
Right. So, like, if we take like the Higgs boson for example, we know that it's kind of like the photon is, it's its own subatomic particle of the I guess we can call it the Higgs field. It's but so we know that all the matter, or that most of the matter in the universe, is because of these particles. So we kind of have an idea where matter comes from, but we still don't have any justification to say, well, something made this do it. You know, all we know is that matter came from this. You know, the universe came from this, but beyond that, you know, we have no justification. It's just like that. Just like the train. If you were to drive up to a train track and the bar was already down and the trains were just already going by, and you're like, oh, I'm stuck here, and then the guy next to you in the car goes, yeah, I bet that there's probably like a gorilla pulling these trains, or maybe it's like, maybe he says, you know, I bet the engine is 5 cars, you know, 5 cars ahead. And it's like, well, how do you know? You know, you weren't there at the beginning. You can assert that, sure, but we weren't there. It's already passed. All we can do is observe what we have here and think about what is the most likely.
Good point, Jim. Just with that, I know Caleb and Travis probably have a response coming up. I just want to let everybody know we have about 8 minutes left of this open discussion. Then we're going into Q&A. So if you have any questions, I see we just got 3 super chats in. If you have any questions, please at Modern Day Debate in the description or in the live chat, and we'll get your question in. About 8 minutes left to go. You guys.
Okay, Red, strong finish. I'm going to shut up now.
All right. So I'm going to jump back to Caleb's argument here for a bit. So you mentioned, was it fundamentally unlimited properties? Is that the correct?
Right. Something that's unlimited in its fundamental properties. Yeah.
All right. So what does that mean to you when you?
Yeah. Right. It's a lot to unpack. So fundamental properties. I mean, the way you can think about it to help to put it in perspective is, you know, Jim and I agree with this idea that a necessary being is like the foundation for the rest of reality. So, you know, being conceptually speaking, so that foundation would be totally unlimited. But I classify it as fundamental properties. I define it as properties that logically don't require other properties in order to exist. And the reason why I define it that way is because I'm willing to grant that perhaps there are some properties that seem like you would have to be limited in other properties or have other properties in order. Like, for example, something can't have colors unless it's limited to being within space would be like an example. But for the most part, I would say most properties are fundamental properties. So that's what I mean. Hopefully that made sense.
So what are one of these fundamental properties you think would have to be within this necessary being? I mean, I assume, you know, Christian stuff, it's the omni traits, but I just want to go down that road. And see.
Yeah. Any case you can make for, and Jim and I actually had a longer discussion about this a while back, but any case you could make for a fundamental property, I'd be willing to grant. So even like some controversial sounding ones like hate, for example, I could say that God has hate. I would just say his hate is directed towards sin or injustice. So it's any, you know, there's just like a few properties that have been put forth where it's like, well, surely God doesn't have that property. And I'd be like, yeah, a spaceless being can't be made of colors, perhaps. But most properties I would grant are fundamental properties.
All right. So so you use the example of hate. I have a hard time seeing how hate is fundamental away from everything else, because you had other instances, injustice and sin and that stuff that you use. It seemed that the hate's pretty based on those other things.
Sure. Well, I mean, I was just throwing that one out there if one wanted to make an argument for it. So I'm saying that God has unlimited consciousness, so unlimited emotional range. And if we're going to categorize hate as an emotion, which I would, then I would say God is unlimited in that, but in a perfect way, not like hateful, like in a malicious way. I just mean that it seems like that's an emotion. I'm willing to max out here. I hold to that God is the fullness of being, so he really has every single property other than these more derivative properties like being made of like spatial type properties. But that's the only reason why I brought up hate, because it was like the most controversial one. So I would say that God doesn't have sin. I would say sin is a word that we use to label actions that are directed away from God, or label actions that are hateful towards other people. And I would say God doesn't have that. That would be an action. So also another one that gets brought up, like somebody asks, well, can God lie? I'd say no, but that's not a fundamental property. That's an action, and God is limited in some actions that he can carry out, not because he lacks the power to, but because his properties balance each other out. So there's a second ordering of these properties in the actions. So he wouldn't be able to carry out injustice, and if lying would fit into that, then he can't lie to people. Again, not because he physically can't do it, it's because it would conflict with his moral characteristics, which are perfect and unlimited. So that's just to kind of help flesh that out a little bit. But go ahead.
Would it be better in that instance to use like a word like dishonest with?
Sure. I think so. I mean, yeah, because I mean, telling a falsehood is different than like deceiving.
Sure.
All right. So it sounds the way you're going here is that are you trying to hold to divine simplicity in this argument?
Not necessarily. So I hold to more of a Scotus's view of simplicity, which isn't as radical. So that God is simple in the sense that he doesn't have physical parts, but there can still be distinctions among his attributes. So the argument doesn't have to hold to a specific view of simplicity.
All right. So, and I guess talking about all these properties of the necessary being, I still don't see how your argument from contingency necessitates those properties be part of it. I'm having a hard time piecing those.
Well, sure. So the necessary being can't be contingent, and I'm arguing that anything that's fundamentally limited is contingent, because you can always ask, well, why is it limited in that way and not some other way? Why is it a square and not a circle? Why does it have this limited amount of power and not that other limited amount of power? But something that's unlimited, that's one of a kind. It's just a completely unlimited reality. And that would make sense intuitively if we're thinking of the foundation of reality would just be completely unlimited. I mean, at least that would make intuitive sense. So for it to be limited is to then introduce a kind of contingency. So that's why I'm saying that the necessary thing would have to be unlimited, fundamentally speaking.
All right. Maybe there's a miscommunication coming across here.
Oh, you can rephrase it again. And I mean, I understand. Like, I mean, I have these types of debates all the time, but if you want to rephrase it or ask it again.
Well, I was just saying that you seem to accept even fundamental limitations as you already open, so that you take away any way for that necessary being to be unlimited in the way that with the properties you think it needs to have.
Wait. Sorry, I got a little bit confused there. So you said I introduced fundamental limitations into God?
When you talk, yes, when you're talking about because of the different properties within God, there's limitations on what they can do. So it doesn't seem like those fundamental properties are unlimited in God.
They modify, they coalesce, they harmonize, but they're still unlimited. So he still is totally unjust. Just. He still is totally powerful, but they work together. And then that is why God wouldn't be able to carry out an unjust action. It's not because his power is literally limited. It's that his power works alongside with his justice, is what I'm arguing.
If I can ask you a quick question, why do you believe that things that exist are contingent?
Sorry, can you rephrase that? Why do
you believe that everything that comes to exist is contingent?
You said everything that comes. I mean, even if something has always existed, it can still be contingent if it's fundamentally limited in its properties. Because of that modal feature that I mentioned, you can ask that question.
In all properties, though, like does that mean that if my wagon was all red, that it was was an exception to the rule?
If your wagon was all red, it's an exception. I don't.
Right, it would be a maximal. It would be a maximized property of it. The redness of it. It's all red. There's no part of it that's not red. So does that mean that it would be there'd be an exception to the argument for it?
No, because I mean, even if it was, and I think we're done, but even if it was unlimited in that regard, it's limited in other ways. So it would
Right,
still
but
be contingent.
that's what I'm saying. Is it has to be unlimited in every aspect, or just in certain aspects that are appealing?
In every aspect that's fundamental.
All
Can
right.
I, actually, can I do a quick closing?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, no, I just want to say that, appeals to infinite regresses and multiverse and appeals to futurism, I think are totally unsubstantiated. And the evidence that we see right now points to the universe being an emergent feature of mind, and studies in quantum cognition show that the properties that it emerges from correlates to what we consider mind. So I would say the physics right now is pointing towards a theistic model. And that, infinite multiverses and infinite regresses are pure speculation and appeals to futurism.
All right. Anybody else want to say anything before we move to the Q&A? All right. Here we go. Praise, thank you for taking down the questions for tonight. I'm going to go ahead and answer those now, and really appreciate the super chats. Those are very helpful. Let's see here. All right. Okay, so first off, we got Steven Steen. Thank you so much for your $2 donation. Jim, almost won, buddy. Maybe next time. Taking shots. All right.
Wait, who's that from? I don't remember that person ever debating me or having the balls. Love you, Steven.
We got Stupid Energy. Thank you so much for your $5 super chat. Why would God use evolution, which is a process that required pain and suffering?
He has a plan.
Actually, you know what is interesting? I've read Cy Gard's book on this, the works of his hands, and we see like what we would consider bad before we were here. I mean, was it really bad? It seems like it's. I see evolution has evidence of design for a specific outcome, so I don't really see any problem with evolution and theism being.
All right, Caleb, you want to?
Yeah. So this is a big topic that I'd have a lot to say about, but I'll just keep it short. So I made a video on the problem of evil, so I'd recommend that. But basically, I mean, I hold to a different perspective in responding to the problem of evil. I think God's moral nature limits his interaction with the universe, so that opens the door to natural evil and so on. But this would take a long time to sort out, so I'll just leave it there.
Sure. Thank you so much for that response. Johnny V, thanks so much for your $2 super chat. Jim's mustache is an Aristotelian perfect form. Nice. You got an admirer.
Anything.
Yeah, you definitely got an admirer out there. Stupid Horridity again with a $10 bomb. What does Caleb think of Stern-Gerlach experiment, which seems to show that classical logic is simply not equipped to deal with the phenomena of this sort?
Yeah, so I did look. I'm not familiar with that. I did look it up, and it looks like it's like the double slit experiment or something like that. But yeah, I mean, quantum physics poses some mysterious elements, but I don't think that it gives us sufficient warrant to jettison applying the classic laws of logic to concrete reality. So when we're talking about like the law of non-contradiction, I don't think a rock or particle can literally exist and fail to exist at the same time. Now I know there's Schrodinger's cat and that, but I don't think that proves that example to show that something can exist and not exist at the same time. So I would just I think we need a pretty strong reason to overthrow laws of logic, but that's how I respond.
Well, if I can add something just real quick, I also think it's really important to acknowledge just how little physicists know about things of that nature, the subatomic and quarks and string theory and things like that. We have a very loose understanding of some of them, but I don't think that it's safe to say that we don't understand it. People concede that we don't understand it. Scientists concede that we don't understand it. Therefore, we have to come up with a theological or a supernatural explanation. I think that there's no reason not to believe that there's a perfectly naturalistic explanation for it.
Well, I would say that physicists, we're learning more and more, and I would say that the evidential data so far is pointing towards theism. And I think, we got to be careful not to make appeals to futurism, both on the theistic side and on the, naturalistic, atheistic side as well.
Well, to me, I just want to throw in one more thing. And this gets back into epistemology, which is its own debate. But, to me, there's just nothing more obvious than things like the law of non-contradiction, applies to concrete reality. And it's not something we gather evidence to confirm. It's something that we just recognize as true. So, that's where I would go from there. But that gets into a whole nother debate. So.
All right, Red's the only one that didn't say anything there.
Come on, Red.
This is strong silent type, man.
Yeah.
I
All
got
right.
a question.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I said I kind of forgot what the question was.
It was really for the theist, but all right, we'll move on. Someone's behind you. Thank you for your question. Converse, question for Cal and Tra, Caleb and Travis, I guess. If God is realistic, all powerful, knowing, the creator of all life, the author of intelligent design, why are there so many design flaws? Boom.
Okay, so are you wanting me to go first, I guess?
Sure.
I would say that, okay, in reference to the design flaws, this kind of gets into the fine tuning. And what's interesting is all the features of our universe, what you're calling flawed, are necessary for us to be here. Like, we even have to have the average distance between stars, the correlation of the strong weak nuclear forces, gravitational force constant, and all these things work together harmoniously for us to be here. So I would need some kind of demonstration to show that this flaw could exist and life could still be possible. Because everything we see.
If God decided tomorrow to tweak the universe just a little bit, could he make it so that we could survive in that universe?
That's a pure hypothetical. I don't know. That's purely hypothetical.
But it's purely in the realm of something that God would do.
Yeah, it'd be pure speculation. I don't know.
All right, Caleb, you wanted to respond to this?
Yeah, I'll respond the same way. I think that God can create a perfect universe without any suffering. That's what heaven is. But now we're getting into the problem of evil, which is its own debate. But I'll just go back to my response earlier about evolution and suffering. I think that God's nature limits how he interacts with the universe, but I don't have time to defend all of that. But that's how I would respond the same way again here.
Well, you can
If
check out.
I could add just real quick, Hugh Ross has a really good book on this topic. In fact, that I need to read. It's called "Why the Universe Is the Way It Is," and it looks like it kind of examines how the laws of physics serve a particular purpose. And so, that's a book that I really want to get.
All right, thanks for that reference, and you can check out Caleb's channel for his answer on that topic. All right. Next question, KillDoggy1. At Modern Day Debate, Jim and Red, have either of you had any supernatural or non-secular experiences? If not, has anything made you doubt 100% confidence in materialism?
So I used to be a Pentecostal pastor. So I experienced speaking in tongues and mass hysteria. What Christians call receiving the Holy Spirit or receiving the Holy Ghost. So I did experience things that affected me on a chemical level, but I once attributed it to something supernatural. But I believe that there are perfectly naturalistic explanations for it that there's no reason to suppose that there's anything supernatural about it. And I'll give you a really quick a demonstration of how that's true. I went to the first church other than a Pentecostal church for the first time when I was 14, and it was to my grandparents' Baptist church. And I couldn't understand for the life of me why nobody in there got the Holy Ghost, why nobody in there spoke in tongues, but everybody was a Christian. You know, everybody was crying during worship and everybody had their hands in their air, but nobody spoke in tongues and nobody was getting the Holy Ghost. And I started feeling weird because I was like, do I get the Holy Ghost? Can I do that here? And that's when it all started to hit.
All right, Red, what about you?
Yeah, well, obviously now I don't think I had any supernatural experiences, but when I was younger, I used to sleepwalk a lot, and I had a recurring dream with a demon over the door, and they usually occurred, and that's when I'd be found sleeping by the door. One time I managed to get out of the house and was sleeping on the neighbor's porch, but it was over the same door, and those were usually the nights I slept walk. So that's probably the closest I had to it, but I just, I got a really active imagination and stuff. So
Awesome. Well, I appreciate those honest answers there. All right, thanks so much. Iron Charioteer, for your question. Would you ask Travis, does it not make more sense based on the evidence that we are the result of the universe? Every element in our bodies match with what is in the universe.
Yeah, we are a part of the universe, but the universe emerged from a more fundamental reality. So that objection wouldn't really apply to my claim, because I'm agreeing that we're part of the universe, but that the universe itself is illusory and emergent from a more fundamental reality. So.
All right, thank you so much for that answer. Iron Charioteer, again, for Caleb. If the universe was made for us, Caleb, what is the purpose of all the other planets? Seems like a wasteful God.
Yeah,
I
so-
really want to caveat.
So, I don't think that God, he can create however he wants. I don't know that having lots of planets is necessarily wasteful, but even if one argues that it is, I'm just going to go back to my same response I was giving earlier about other natural evils, that God's nature limits how he creates, and, watch my video on the problem of evil, and, from there. I'd be happy to have a discussion with somebody on the problem of evil and hiddenness and all of that.
Yeah, if you
Just
guys
a
are,
lot to answer.
yeah, if you're interested in coming on Modern Day Debate to have a debate, or my channel as well, you can just send me an email at conversecontender@gmail.com. James and I are always looking for new contenders. So, all right. Third question in a row from Iron Charioteer. Modern Day Debate. Ask Travis, if God is all-powerful, why could it not create life on other planets?
I'm not saying that he couldn't create life on other planets.
Okay. Thank you so much for that.
It's plausible. The evidence does. We haven't really found anything yet. There's a lot of exoplanets. We haven't found any signs of life. But if there are life on other planets, it just shows that God's creative. I'm not really making that argument.
All right. Thanks so much for that response. Nicholas Strode. If the past is an infinite regress, that means an infinite amount of time has passed. Why aren't we still infinitely in the past or the future? All three cases, infinite past. I guess that's for Jim and Red.
Oh, can you say that one more time?
Yeah, I'm just guessing because I know Nick and he's a theist, and he says, if the past is an infinite regress, that means an infinite amount of time has passed. Why aren't we still infinitely in the past or the future? All three cases equal infinite past.
The same reason that God isn't infinitely in the past.
All right, thanks so much for that. Red, would you want to swing at that, or are you good?
Yeah, all I say is that past, so an infinite regress would just past extends infinitely into the past, and we're still in the present now as we're moving forward. So we're in somebody else's past if you assume that the lines go through and are already set, in the future, and it's not just going along as we're going. But for us, we're in the present.
Thanks so much for that. Or did you have something else to add?
Oh, I say, yeah, we're in the present, whether or not it goes back infinitely into the past or not.
Thank you so much for that response. Philip Servanjak. Sorry if I murdered that again, just like last week. I'm gonna talk to you one day and get that right. $10 super chat. Actually, here's two side by side, so I'm not sure which gave which according to this email. But question for Theus: do you know the prior probability for the God explanation for the universe? If not, how do you conclude that it is the most likely explanation?
Well, I'm using deductive reasoning based on what we see in physics, and we can make a deduction based on that.
All right. I mean,
That's
my
the most
argument.
likely.
Yeah. I mean, my argument's not based on like Bayesian probability or something like that. It's a deductive argument. So, yeah, I don't know the prior probability, but I don't argue that way.
All right, that could have been from Philip or the other super chatter here. So there's two questions. One of them, and the next one is from Japexican 07 or 007. $5 super chat. Thank you so much for that generous super chat. If you're claiming an infinite universe machine, then you're essentially calling that machine God. If within space-time the Kalam argument says finite. You guys want to take a swing? I'll try and read it again. If you're claiming an infinite universe machine, then you're essentially calling that machine God. If within space-time, then Kalam argument says finite.
All right.
No, I'm not calling it God. You're calling it God. I never called it God, and it I would say that it doesn't even begin to have the properties that I would assume that you would claim that your God has. I think that you only call it God because I'm positing another possible candidate for something ultimate, some ultimate foundation.
Right. My argument is that the universe is emergent from a property or an attribute of God.
Right, but you believe it comes from a disembodied mind with no agency through which to interact with creation.
No, it's completely, like I said, he would transcend our universe. See, we're so limited from our point of reference. We have to understand that the causal agent would be within and external simultaneously.
What does it mean to transcend this universe? It means to go beyond, right? To go beyond this universe.
To not be bound within its spatial and temporal dimensions.
Right. So if you're not in this universe, you're necessarily somewhere else.
Not if you see, he's not limited by space or by time. So we can't limit him to space.
Why not?
Because space is an emergent feature from a more fundamental reality.
Okay, but you've already conceded that God interacts with reality, correct?
Yes, yeah, it's part of being transcendent, yes.
Okay, so part of God's nature is that he interacts with reality, and you said obeying the laws of physics, correct?
Would not be bound within the laws of physics, but would not break them as being transcendent.
Okay, so and to do so would go against his nature, right?
To do what?
To act against the laws of physics.
No, because he could do things that would transcend the laws of physics without violating them.
Can you give me an example?
It would be a necessary feature of something that transcends the 10 plus dimensions. So let's say, like, Jesus walking on the water, and so forth. It's not that he's violating the law of gravity. It's that he transcends the law of gravity.
Well, he's violating the law of buoyancy.
Explain.
Density.
Explain how. Explain how a transcendent causal agent would violate the laws of physics by doing that.
Well, I mean, nobody walks on water. Nobody. I mean, they thought it was crazy, right? Whenever they, I believe it was Matthew and Luke, and I believe also Mark wrote about it. I don't think John did. But that Jesus walking on water wasn't something normal, right? So we know that this is something that was that violated the laws of physics.
If you're transcendent of the laws of physics, you could do that without violating it.
Right, but if you're transcendent, if you're acting outside of it, then you're not bound by it. So if you're not bound by that law, then you can't violate or not violate that law. But
Yes.
but once you start comparing them, like from within that framework, talking about something that transcends and acts outside of it and beyond it, you can't say that he also adheres to it.
Yes, you can.
It's contradictory.
No.
Just so we can get to all the questions, let's go ahead and move on to the next question.
Point on the
I'm sorry about that.
No, not at all.
So I assume Clown and stuff. Clown focuses on like the Big Bang being the start of the universe and stuff. So if it's in space time and you have a cyclical universe, you could have infinite go back and forth. So
Okay. So we have a $2 super chat from Tiaga Arts. Was Odin part of the chain of contingent causes?
I'll let you handle that one, Dry.
Well, I don't think Odin exists, but any being that's other than God is part of the contingent creation. So anything that could fail or could have been otherwise, anything with fundamental limitations, which Odin would be, unless you're going to ascribe the traditional attributes, Odin would be part of the contingent chain of contingency. Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much for that. Snake was right. Thank you so much for your super chat. $5. At Theist, how can God be unlimited and necessary if he can't break the fundamental laws of logic?
Okay,
I
so
would say that the fundamental laws of logic are an attribute of God.
Yeah. God cannot be illogical because it's against his nature. It's like saying, can God create a rock so heavy that he can't lift it? It's an absurd question to posit because it's illogical.
no, well, hold on. We got different logics with different laws, right? To work with different things. So like the law of excluded middle, we have logic
Okay.
that, and we have dialectic paraconsistent logics that weaken the logic of law of non-contradiction to work with it. So if you're going to hold that the laws of logic are something bound in God's mind, the traditional sense of them, the set that everybody thinks of, then how do you handle these other ones that don't use them and do without them and can work?
All right. Thanks so much.
Sorry. Let me respond to that real quick. So, and this is getting back into epistemology and stuff. Yeah, there are different set types of logics, but I'm going to maintain that there is some set of laws of logic, and what we can debate about what they are, but whatever they are, and again, I'm talking about applying to concrete reality, which is important when we're talking about paraconsistent logics, and that they aren't. It's not that the laws of logic, I don't hold that they exist because God makes them exist, or even that they're necessarily a part of his nature. It's just that they're just necessary descriptors of reality. Reality just could not fail to abide by them, not because they constrain reality. It's just that things just could not, they just necessarily apply. They're just necessary descriptors. It's just the way things have to be. So,
well, I mean,
anyway.
The question of whether or not true contradictions exist is still an open question, right? So
It is, but sorry, go ahead.
But I mean, like one of the things here that traditional laws of logic or traditional logic can't do because of the principle of explosion. So, say we start a country and we write a constitution. We're deciding who gets to vote. And the first one is all landowners can vote, and the next law is women can't vote. Now, sometime in the future, we have a woman landowner. Can she vote or not? Using those classic laws of logic.
I would have to, if you can send that one to me. I didn't follow all the steps, but yeah, I mean, there are some conceptual examples that like paraconsistent logic offers, but I don't think that they apply to concrete things. So, but
Well, I mean,
Yeah, it's like Kant. What you mean, like saying that that immorality is illogical, like it goes against our nature, like that there is no grounds for morality. Essentially, that we are we don't do bad because it's not logical to do bad.
All right. Thanks so much for those great responses and that little interaction there. All right. Subtracted. Thank you so much for your $2 super chat. How did God create time if creation is an action?
Okay, so my response is that time, the way from our point of reference, we experience time, but on a more time is basically illusory and an emergent feature of a more fundamental reality.
All right.
So I hold to the B theory of time.
All right. Thanks so much for that response. Subtracted. Another $5 super chat. Thank you so much for that. Did God set the standard of his good nature, or is his nature just good for no reason?
neither. His nature is necessary. He's necessarily good because he necessarily has to be. So it's not for no reason, but he didn't set that standard either, in my view.
All right.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I think they're asking if his nature is contingent.
Yeah, no.
I would
All
say
right.
that our universe is contingent on his nature.
Okay. Thanks so much for those great questions. If you got any more questions, get them in quickly because we're about to end. We only got a couple more questions left. Stupidor Energy, thank you so much for your $5 super chat for Travis. What about the verse that Christ died once for all seems to imply that we are alone in the multiverse?
Could you repeat that?
Sure. For Travis, what about the verse that Christ died once for all seems to imply we are all alone in the multiverse?
No. Okay. So with Christ, and actually, I'm going to borrow from Hugh Ross. Okay. So let's say that if he transcends space and time as God, if he was crucified and he existed in, say, 2 dimensions of time, he could atone for the sins of everyone, past, present, and future, simultaneously. So if you have the nature of God, that wouldn't apply. That would just apply, like, say, from a human point of reference.
All right. Thank you so much for that response. Looks like the last question we got here. Jap Mexican 007. Thank you for your 199 super chat. Speaking in tongues is not biblical, Jim.
Oh, it's not? Well, you need to read Acts 2.
It is biblical. It depends on what we define as speaking in tongues. But speaking in tongues itself
Exactly.
is biblical. So.
Exactly. Now, are you if you're talking about babbling, or if you're talking about actually speaking in other tongues, and there's some texts that say that you have to have an interpreter with you, but there's also varying ideas of what speaking in tongues is. But that's a whole other argument.
All right, Caleb, you want to add to that, or are you good?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know people draw different distinctions. Like some will say that speaking in tongues was just limited to like evangelizing in the early church, but I don't take a hardline stance on this questions.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, with that, thank you guys so much for your great responses. Thanks everybody for your great questions and all the super chats. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. That will let the channel know that you are enjoying these type of discussions and you want to see more. This was a cool tag team debate tonight. I was happy to mod because I thought this was going to be a great discussion, and it was as I thought. And if you haven't liked this video yet, go on and like it. And please consider becoming a patron of the channel, because this is a channel that's bridging the gap between the theist side and the more agnostic atheist side. And we hear a lot of complaints about the far sides, the far reaches of each side. But if you want to support a real middle ground, make sure to go give a Patreon or subscribe to the channel. And with that, Thanks everybody for showing up, and thanks to all the audience. And keep sifting out the
Reasonable from the
unreasonable. Thanks.